What potential is there?
You'll end up with a product that in many cases would be competitive with maybe local fossil alternatives. That means you are basically cost parity with many type of fossil fuels. Is the reward high enough? Is it worth the investment risk?
And is it or is it not? Welcome to the Natural Hydrogen Investment Podcast, where we help you understand the opportunity in the evolving field of natural hydrogen. I'm Anthony, chemical engineer and hydrogen enthusiast.
And I'm Morten, industry expert and founder of specialized investor Natural Hydrogen Ventures.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about the economics behind natural hydrogen. What potential is there? But before we begin, don't forget that you can download the 2025 Natural Hydrogen Investor Report from our website, nath2investing.com. You'll find plenty of insights on the companies which are publicly traded in this space, and so much more about private companies, which you'll find very interesting. Remember, it's nath2investing.com. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and like this video. And if you're listening to us on Spotify and or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We love 5-star reviews. Anyway, let's get things started right now. Morten, so I wanted to ask you, why does natural hydrogen make sense from an investment point of view? And let me tell you why. Just give me a few seconds. Because I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to these new fields. Like, for example, we had crypto, we had Web3, and I was very heavily invested in those spaces. It didn't turn out very well. AI has been another one which has been turning out well for everybody, I think. When it comes to natural hydrogen, I was initially a bit skeptical. I've grown to understand it a bit more, and I feel a bit more optimistic now. But what would you say is the opportunity, especially when there are so many people listening to us who don't know as much as we do?
Well, I think from an investment point of view, I would always look at how big is the potential price. How much money could potentially be earned here? And while you're right that you should be skeptical of all new things, and natural hydrogen, as many other new industries, has things to prove still. But the potential with natural hydrogen is that basically it could be cheap enough to be actually used. And this is what takes it apart from a lot of other hydrogen types and to some degree other energy types. So it's basically, is the reward high enough? Is it worth the investment risk, especially when you're talking early stage investment like this field obviously is?
And just giving an initial assessment, is it or is it not?
It is. It is. But be aware, you are asking an unashamed and very bullish guy on this. I do run the only specialized fund investing into this area. So yeah, I do believe this will work. I do think that leveraging the existing skills from the industry of oil and gas and mining, and with all the knowledge we have just acquired in the last 3 years, this is going to work. But essentially, why it's going to work, why it has potential.
That's a good question, actually. Why does it have potential? And I know that when it comes to hydrogen, we have like we mentioned in a previous episode, there's a blue hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen, pink hydrogen, and green, which is the most popular, of course, the most supported by governments. Maybe not so much in the future. We need to see where it goes. But when it comes to natural hydrogen, I know there's the economic advantage of the pricing. So natural hydrogen is going to be worth, how much is it again per kilo?
There's no straight answer. What is very often said is $1 a kilo, which is also probably not coincidentally the holy grail for hydrogen is to get to $1 a kilo, because that means you are basically cost parity with many type of fossil fuels. That means you can really start using it. But how to get natural hydrogen to $1 a kilo, that requires some different things. But before I touch on that and tell you, who else have made these calculations than us, the important thing to remember, the reason why there is a potential in the first place is that there is no input cost for natural hydrogen. It's a real energy. Of course, it has cost to drill a well, and you maybe run a few technical stuff to get the well flowing. but nothing compared to all the electricity you're going to buy to produce green hydrogen, which, in case the listeners don't know it, you're buying electricity, splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. That is 70% of the cost of green hydrogen. That's electricity. So I would argue if you're investing into green hydrogen, you are also betting that you will have access to very cheap electricity, meaning that you are need to make sure that that keeps getting cheaper. Maybe it will. It just means you're actually betting on something else than your specific industry. But the same blue hydrogen, gray hydrogen has an input cost. Gray hydrogen, that's methane, that's natural gas that you're splitting. And blue is the same, where you then take the end product, the carbon dioxide, and then you sequester it, you put it down. And that has an extra cost layer. I'm not saying that other things might not work, and some areas they could work and be competitive, but it's just they have an input cost. You're going to buy natural gas to produce green or blue hydrogen. So you will be hooked on to how that fluctuates. When we see the energy crisis, things got really expensive. Now they're not. Then you have the problem with storing the carbon dioxide from the blue hydrogen production. But somewhere that might work, somewhere it will not work. But back to natural hydrogen. So because you have no input cost, this is why it could be so cheap. But as is very often asked by critics or people just being, still looking for the answers, it means a lot how much a natural hydrogen wells flows. It's not cheap just if a few kilos come out of the ground. So flow rates mean something. That's basically how much gas is coming up. And then the gas mixture means something, because natural hydrogen will, I dare to say, never, flow pure. There will be something mixed with the gas, likely nitrogen, maybe sometimes a bit of methane that needs to be separated, reinjected. Sometimes you're lucky there'll be helium, which is very valuable gas. You see companies like Gold Hydrogen having found helium in their wells. Hytera talks about it in Kansas where they work, because you found it in historic wells. So we need to separate it. So it's flow rates and gas mix that means something. And so that means if you find only 5% hydrogen in your gas mix and it only flows 2 kilos a day, that's going to be expensive. At the other end, you can find numbers where it's really, really cheap. And the first calculations out there were from Department of Energy in the US. Lately, we've seen they're called Thunderset Energy. What would we call it? An energy number crunching agency. You can buy their reports. I think we'll put a link in the description. They made a really brilliant report, basically stating that this type of hydrogen, natural hydrogen, could cost as little as $0.3 a kilo and to $10 a kilo. So that kind of gives you the range. But one thing I need to say about the Thunderset Energy, there's a color alert. They're really big on adding color names to hydrogen, which is a subject in itself. We could do a podcast on why I think that's really not the way to go. But they are calling it gold hydrogen, and then defining white hydrogen as the natural hydrogen, and then orange hydrogen as where you need to stimulate the rocks to produce it. First time I've ever heard that, color use is set up this way. So just be aware that it's actually natural hydrogen they're talking about in that report.
You mentioned something very interesting, which is a stimulated hydrogen. And I know that stimulated hydrogen, it takes a bit more of investment, but it might be a alternative source of energy, of natural hydrogen. So tell me more about stimulated hydrogen and why this is a viable option we have in the terms of getting and extracting this hydrogen out of the ground.
Well, I think we touched on this before, and we will do an episode only on stimulated, maybe bringing in some of the guys from VMH to discuss this. It basically means that in areas where you do find the right kind of subsurface, but for different reasons doesn't see a lot of hydrogen, you could pump down water and then have the reaction going on so you can produce more hydrogen. And the potential here is then there'll be so many more areas in the world where you have the right rocks, but not the right chemistry happening. So you can do this. What my thinking is that this is not the first thing we'll see. I think we'll see natural hydrogen work in itself, and then maybe stimulated could help produce more in some of these wells, or it could stand alone work. Another report from or a paper from Stanford University actually crunches these numbers as well. So does Thunderset, the report, and they always come out more expensive. So because you need to do more work.
Yeah.
But maybe eventually it could be the only way it works, and then that's fine. And if you could produce a lot, you bring down the price. So that's the things we don't know yet. But it's definitely an option, and it could open many more areas for potential natural hydrogen production. So definitely
Yeah.
interesting to follow, no doubt.
I'm aware that stimulated hydrogen they uses, for example, catalysis to produce hydrogen, which is obviously going to be one of the expenses, one of the costs in the process.
Mm.
So in general, I mean, adding to this idea of the catalysis and so on, the extraction costs, what are they when it comes to natural hydrogen and stimulated hydrogen? Usually, what are these factors that go into the cost? Because I know that green hydrogen, as you said, is a big part of it is the electricity costs. And the next part of it is the infrastructure. So when it comes to the electrolyzer equipment and piping and transport, what comes into play when it's natural hydrogen that's being considered?
In the future, we can we can break this down a lot, but for now, we'll keep it on, investor relevant level, saying that the cost involved in natural hydrogen production will be drilling your actual production well, setting it up to produce, and then when the gas flows to the surface, separating it, basically purifying, so it's pure hydrogen. And while this have costs, obviously, the more you produce, the lower the overall cost. You'll have more production to divide your construction cost with. But what is very likely, I think many in the industry thinks this, especially in Italy, where we might not see massively producing wells, the cost driver will be the separation. How to
Right.
separate the hydrogen and then to purify it, which is something that is problematic in biomass to hydrogen and to some degree hydrogen, green hydrogen as well. So separation is key, meaning, speaking from an investment point of view, there's a lot of technology out there owned by companies, public or private, that could see a huge market if this really takes off. The reason why it's probably not the best if you want natural hydrogen exposure to go out and buy these shares straight away. That's because they're doing so many other things that even if they triple or 100x their exposure to natural hydrogen, selling 100 times more than they do today, it will still be a very little part of their overall business. But the potential is there. And one have to remember this is also one of the things where we are leveraging existing industry skills because you can separate gas already. The big one, Air Liquid, Linde, does this all day long with different kinds of
Yeah.
technologies.
Actually, I was about to ask you about that. So it's good that you mentioned the existing talent in the space. I wanted to ask you about now the existing infrastructure in the space. I'm aware that many of these mines and old wells, which are for oil and gas, they have some of them have natural hydrogen within them. We just never explored for it. So will this be maybe a factor in cost in making things cheaper using existing infrastructure of oil and gas and mining?
It will be such an obvious thing to believe, but I think the places where we find hydrogen in oil and gas fields, it's not sure yet if that could be extracted just the hydrogen. So that might, geology wise, we don't exactly know. But even if we imagine that we could, if the hydrogen is possible to extract using existing oil and gas infrastructure, is not something you can do straight away. Um, if you're really into hydrogen, you might have been reading that you could put hydrogen into natural gas pipelines. There'll be different degrees of how many percentages of hydrogen this can carry, but it should be technically feasible. It's just that, from what I'm aware of, nowhere in the world are you allowed to do it. The natural gas operators are not very keen to take the risk of what might happen. And what might happen is that these steel pipes might be destroyed by the hydrogen, which is very reactive. And this doesn't mean that you can't pipe hydrogen, because you can't. And it's done already. You just need different kind of pipes. So maybe you could, maybe it's technically feasible, but as an investor, I'm very impatient. I always look for how can we do it quicker, and the likely quicker option is if you're really lucky to find it close to where hydrogen is needed as it is. Maybe if you find it in California, you can put it on a truck and then send it to the refueling stations where people are paying a lot of money for their hydrogen. But most places, that's not the case. So you would likely turn it into something else because whether it's natural hydrogen or green hydrogen, it's a bit difficult to transport. So turning the natural hydrogen into other substances like ammonia, which is derived from hydrogen, or methanol, which is derived from hydrogen, these two are products that is much easier to transport and they have an existing market. So that will be my bet that that's what we're going to see first. But that's still some years out, but that's definitely, and that will add cost. But starting at such a low price of natural hydrogen, you can already now do calculations. If you take existing technology, plug out whatever green hydrogen you plan to use, and put in natural hydrogen, you'll end up with a product that, in many cases, would be competitive with maybe local fossil alternatives.
Right. Okay. So right now, the targeted markets, they exist. The applications, they exist. It's important, I think, for our viewers and our listeners to understand this. It's not that we are remaking a new industry or rebuilding the wheel, as they say. We are entering an existing market of hydrogen. Hydrogen is very needed across many markets, across many applications. We know that even as a chemical feedstock, it is crucial. Actually, this is not something very popular among hydrogen enthusiasts, but also for the oil and gas industry. You need hydrogen. You need it for dehydrogenation, sorry, and other processes which are used for the oil production. So taking that into account, I think we were mentioning just before the call, we're having a short chat, and I remember you said that there are a series of factors that can, let's say can or cannot help a stock price of a publicly traded hydrogen company rise or go down or decline. So what would you say is a very positive sign of a natural hydrogen exploration company in terms of their stock signals? What should people be following in terms of these signals?
Well, I think related to the potential economy of natural hydrogen, I think you should be looking for the areas they're operating in. It requires some, detailed work, but I think, and I haven't crunched, detailed area, every area every natural hydrogen company works in. But just say, um, someone thinks that maybe Greenland could be attractive. It seems to be from a geologic perspective. It's just that it will require that you find a lot of natural hydrogen to make it commercial to move it out of there. And Greenland is a good. There's no trees in Greenland, so you do not have a lot of biogenic carbon that you could use to produce methanol, let's say, from your hydrogen. But an area that is, has some really interesting potential is an area like the middle of the U.S. in Kansas, in Iowa, both states where you see activities. And this requires a lot of local knowledge. Hytera speaks to this in their presentation, the ASX listed company that works in Kansas, that the farmers in this area, they use ammonia as it is mixed with water to fertilize their cornfields. So that means you have a local market for a derived product of your natural hydrogen. And that is something that I will always be looking for. Some of the exploration companies, the private one I speak with doing my day job, they will probably sometimes hate me for looking straight at where's the market access, and then can we find natural hydrogen? Because I think in this early stage industry, that is so important. Because what if you only find a fair amount? What if it's not a massive discovery? How to commercialize it? And I want to see a road to commercialization. And so that's always good to look for. It's not a trigger, because Hytera has been working in this area ever since they started. And so it's not a thing that in itself trigger a stock price rise. But
Right.
it that will be other things. that could trigger this. But it's good. It's some of these things that I would look for when looking into natural hydrogen. And but be aware that the companies know this as well. So when you read through their presentations, they will be sure to tell you how the hydrogen could be used. But as you said earlier, I do think I'm definitely a believer that we should start by using the hydrogen for where it's needed already. And you will find people in the world and in the natural hydrogen industry who says, so we could use it for trucking and we could use it for, but the market doesn't exist already. It might if you
Exactly.
start finding a lot of cheap hydrogen, but then you have to wait for your the companies nearby buying a lot of hydrogen trucks. So looking for where we could use it straight out of the well or gate would be what I would prefer to do.
Yeah, I think we have to avoid doing what many startups or what many industries do, which is creating a solution in search of a problem. So we know the problems exist. We should target them first. I know that there are certain applications. I don't want to tread on anybody's toes, but I know certain applications such as domestic heating and passenger vehicles, they are not the best for this. I mean, if we're going to put priorities first, we got to put them where they are needed. And sometimes they won't be the places that we want them to be, but they have to go where we need them, if for industrial reasons or for economic reasons.
I totally agree with you. I never tell people that, hydrogen will be for your personal car or for a truck. Even it's a good thing to say because people, we all drive cars or many does. So it will feel like something they know. So I do focus on the other things, but let's just imagine for a while that we find a lot of natural hydrogen and it can actually be produced at $1 a kilo, even twice that. That means that there will be ample room for the explorer to make a profit, to pay quite a few euros or dollars to move it to a refueling station, because moving hydrogen as it is, it's expensive because it has a low volumetric density, meaning you can't carry much in a truck. But even so, bringing it to a refueling station, making the refueling station owner earn more than he does on diesel, and you will still be able to sell it cheaper than diesel. Because this is what hydrogen really is. It's a ready fuel for diesel truck or car. So if you find enough of it so people, can get hydrogen everywhere and feel secure that it'll keep flowing, this is a good example of how this could work without any subsidies at all. It will be perfect for trucking and maybe some places in the world where the electricity grid will never be able to handle EVs, or maybe the electricity grid is non-existent. This could work, but again, it requires that we do find a lot of it. So that's why I bring it in sometimes. It's a really good and hopefully easily understandable example because it's so cheap that you can run your truck or car on hydrogen cheaper as you can on diesel.
Right. I have a question now. Before we go to the final question, you've mentioned several times something interesting, which is if we find enough quantities of it. Okay. So I know that theoretically, the USGS, the US Geological Survey, they have mentioned a number which is 5.6 trillion metric tons. Don't flame me in the comments if I'm wrong. I think that's the amount.
It's a lot.
So it's a lot. Okay. So translating that number, which is 5.6 trillion metric tons, to actually extracting it from the ground, what is the difference there? I mean, what is the disconnect there is there? Why can't we just extract 5.6 trillion tons? I know that sounds ridiculous, but tell us why.
First of all, there's how much of this is actually, near the surface, able to be, can we reach it? But crucially, the question we need to answer is how much of this have accumulated in commercial pockets where you can drill down and find a lot of it? Because it might be that it's dispersed equally. So there's a little bit everywhere in the subsurface. And that'll be really fun for science, but not really fun for exploration. I do think we have seen already, that from the well in Mali that had pure hydrogen flowing, even if it's a small amount, that this does occur. It's not evenly distributed. There will be places, and you have seen quite impressive flow rates of hydrogen in accidental wells, combined with a lot of oil and gas as well. So it's very likely there. For me, the question is, will this be something that works somewhere, making some investors and explorers extremely rich because they'll be producing a commodity basically really, really cheap, and the rest of the world have to produce it from something that requires an input cost? Or will it be something that we find so many places that it completely changes the game of energy. This is where I think we're at right now. We need to figure out which of these. But we are still looking for the first truly commercial well being made official or found.
Yes, and I think that this is something which you can either take as something positive or as something negative. I think anybody who is invested in this space, they have to understand this risk factor, which is we're not producing yet, but at the same time, even though we're not producing, we haven't built that the infrastructure of saying, well, this is where we get it from, or this country, or this nation. Uh, that is the magic of being in this space so early. I think we are at a time when it's like the beginning of the hockey stick. Once it does become productive, once we do get it down to the price we want to get it, it might it might explode. It might not explode, but if it does explode, you are in at the best possible moment. And I think that's the exciting part of being in natural hydrogen investment.
That basically it's the question: if this was proven, and everyone knew this already, we won't discussing early stage investment. Then these companies will be much more expensive, much higher valued.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's risk reward, and I will recommend no one being as invested as I am. But do a proportional amount of your investment amount into this space if you're interested,
Absolutely.
because it's
Yeah.
risky, no doubt, but the price is really, really high.
Yeah. And based on this, the final question for me today to you is personally, I mean, this is very, I'm going to put you on the spotlight here. Do you think we can hit $1 or less per kilo? Because this is based on many things. It's based on the studies, based on the science, based on the economics. Based on what you've seen on the evidence, is it possible?
I would say definitely yes, that it is possible. But I think the first wells we'll see producing commercial quantities would be more expensive, and maybe even it'll be $3, $4, $5. This is just guessing, but I'm just saying that at this moment when this happens, it turns from an exploration into more of an engineering problem. And then many more people will be able to understand, okay, this works. How can we do it better? And we are used to this both as founders of companies and investors that investing into optimizing a process. How can we maybe engineer our way out of it? How can we find another place to drill where whatever makes this expensive, make this cheaper? And I have in this great confidence in what the oil and gas industry can do. And I know this is not a good reference for if you're really into natural hydrogen because of the clean energy potential, because we will be using skills from the industry that have found a lot of fossil fuels, but they've been really good at it. And they made shale gas in the US work, even when many of the big companies thought it couldn't. So, and they just put their mind to it. We're really good at extracting and drilling and engineering in the subsurface. So when we reach the point of a commercial flowing well, I would say even it doesn't matter how expensive that first one is per kilo of hydrogen, because then we have something we can work on, and that will just
Yeah.
be amazing.
Something we can replicate. And I think
Exactly, and get better from
yeah,
drilling 10 new wells, and you will guess even the same company drilling that well probably will drill someone that already half the price of
yeah.
hydrogen, because they'll know to find a
Actually,
better spot.
actually, when it comes to the oil and gas overlap with the natural hydrogen, I think it's a bit let me be a romantic for a second. And I think it's special to think that the people who helped build all of this oil and gas space, which caused so much damage to the planet, let's be honest here, even though it did so much good at the same time, they will take this knowledge in hurting the planet and eventually take it to natural hydrogen, where we will help protect it and help form this clean energy revolution and get us to net zero and so on. So I think it's a positive to be taken, because otherwise, I mean, who would be working on those natural hydrogen wells? Wouldn't have the talent if it's not for the people who already came from exploration and drilling and mining and extraction.
I totally agree. I think it's uh, oil and gas industry gave us the energy we needed to build our society. And then we found out that we need to stop spewing carbon into the atmosphere. We're looking for something else, and nothing have come up that can where we can switch everything in one go. So we still need it. I wish we wouldn't, but we still need oil and gas. But it's interesting, as you said, to see all these very experienced people looking and many actually jumping into the natural hydrogen industry, getting paid a lot less, sometimes nothing at all, because they're starting new companies and they're doing this. And more than one have told me that because some of these are experienced in a way that you see they're experienced because they'll have gray hair and they'll tell you that they couldn't keep telling their grandchildren that they were still finding new oil and gas fields. They wanted to use their skills for something else as well. So, and I don't want everyone to be that, have that savior spirit. But, it's interesting to see, and I understand them. That is something that I want to do as well, being a good ancestor when investing. We want to invest in something that brings capital that our descendants can use, but also making sure they're living on a livable planet, basically. That's being a good ancestor.
I hope to get one of those soon.
It's in the mail. Consider it, Anthony. It's on its
Okay,
way.
thank you. That's good. That's good. Okay, well, that's a good thought to end the episode with. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching us and joining us. This is our 4th episode, so it's starting to get, we're starting to get some practice in this. And we're very excited to share with you the 2025 investor report. You can go to our website, like I said at the beginning, nath2investing.com. You can sign up there and then you get immediately, hopefully, if the mail service is working, you will immediately get the report in your email. Remember to subscribe to us if you're watching us on Spotify. If you're listening to us on Apple or on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. We need them. Just let's be clear here. We need them because we're growing and we want to reach more people. So that's all I can say for now. Thank you. And thank you, Morten.
Thank you, Anthony.
See you in the next episode.
See you.